up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us at Lindley Wood Reservoir, Murfield Water, and it's only the second time I've fished it, only the second time I've seen it really. I fished it a few weeks ago, fished on the tip, and I thought there were a few fish to be caught short on a pole line. Now it's come up since we fished it last time, about probably 5 if not 6 feet, so it's completely changed. So it's I've had to actually fish a lot further out than I was expecting today. I was expecting to fish sort of 5-6 metres, but today I'm having to fish pretty much between 11.5 and 13 metres today. So basically I'm keeping things quite simple today in terms of how I'm going to fish the peg. I'm going to fish one area of the peg but in 2 different depths, if that sort of makes sense. Because we're fishing on quite a steep gradient, I want to fish at 6 foot, and I also want to set a rig at 8 foot. So that's what I've done, is I've plumbed up at 8 foot or 8.5, something like that. That's pretty much at the end of my 13 metre section, and I've come back a section and found 5.5, 6 feet deep. So that's sort of a decent gradient there. Over a section it's dropping off 2 feet, so it gives me a nice feed area to build over. So what I've done initially is I've started off, and I've only been fishing for sort of 10 minutes, and I've just started to get a few fish, is I've put in 5 balls on my long line at 13 metres, and I've put in 2 balls shorter at 11.5, and I'm just loose feeding hemp and casters over the top. And that's just the one area of the peg that we're going to concentrate on today. So that said, the rigs that I've set up 2 that are covering the 13 metre depth, which is, like I say, 8.5 foot, and I've set up 4 that are covering, well, one that's covering sort of the deck rig at about 6 foot deep, we'll call it, and I've set shallow rigs up as well over the top, so it gives me an option to fish around that area, up and down in the water all through the day, and hopefully chase the fish around. So we'll start with the heaviest rig that I've got set up, or I should say the one that I'm looking to target sort of the better fish on. This one I've set a bodied rig up, so it's a number 8 elastic in the top end, a nice long line, 3 number 8 back shot, and I've got a 1 gram Daiwa Gloucester there. I've got this set about 1 inch over depth at the moment. So initially I've started off with a bulk, and I've just got 4 number 10 droppers. Hopefully as the day goes on I'll look to bring those down and pair them up to fish a bit more positively if there's a few skimmers in the peg. Main line on all the rigs is 0.14 today, and hook length wise I've got 0.12 fluorocarbon to a size 18 Tubatini Series 18 hook on this one. So a nice square pattern hook, takes plenty of variety of baits, and like I say, it's a perfect hook for fishing double caster, maggots, worms, that kind of thing. So nice versatile hook. The other rig that I've got set up for that 13 metre line, I've set up a 1.5 gram Preston Paolo float. So in terms of the makeup of the rig, it's exactly the same as the previous, but like I say, a pencil float, and this is fishing really positive and getting down to the fish when they're feeding aggressively. So you can see with this I've got the bulk set a lot closer to the hook, and I've just got 2 number 9 droppers, nice and positive, and the same hook length as the previous rig. So like I say, this is for bombing the bait down. The other rig I've got options in terms of stringing the shot out, fishing through the water, or fishing like a double bulk. This is basically sort of almost a roach bagging rig, if you like. So then on to the 11.5 metre line. As you can see, it's a fair bit shallower, and I've just set up pretty much a lighter version of that previous rig for this one. So it's a number 6 elastic in the top end, and in this case I've got a Sensus SA2 pencil float. So same principle as the previous rig, with a bulk, 2 number 9 droppers, and then the same hook length again. Right, so that leads us on to the shallow rigs that I've got set up. There's not too much involved with these, they're all the same. Number 6 elastic at the top end, and I've got Preston Chiantis on these. 4 12s through all the rigs. And I've got one set at 6 foot, one at 4.5, and one at about 3. I've just got number 10 shots spread down the line, and then I've just got an 0.10 fluorocarbon hook length to a size 16 black gamma hook. So I'm going barbless hooks on the shallow rigs just to speed up the process if we're catching on them, and also because we're fishing in deep water, I expect when I hook the fish that they'll go down in the water, so there's no real need for barbed hooks on this one. So in terms of the bait choice today, I've kept it pretty traditional. I've gone for a nice black ground bait mix. As you can see, there's a few decent sized particles in there. So I've just got equal parts Sensus River, Sensus Black Gardon Noir, which is nice sort of heavy mix, plenty of big particles in it. And I've got a bag of frenzied hemp seed black in there as well. So a fairly active mix, but plenty of stickiness to the mix to help it carry the bait down to the bottom. In terms of bait selection on the side tray today, we've got about 3 pints of casters, so like I say, I'm expecting to loose feed quite a lot. I've got about the same of hemp seed, some maggots for the hook. I've got a few deads as well to put in the ground bait, nice inert bait for skimmers. A few grains of corn just in case there's a few skimmers present. And I've also got some worms which I've not introduced as yet. Like I say, those worms will come into it if I'm looking to target perch and basically if there's no roach showing. But ideally today I want to be targeting the roach and the skimmers, so the worms, they might come into it a little bit later on as a change bait, but I'm not expecting to feed them initially. So like I say, that's pretty much it. The setup's fairly straightforward in terms of what I'm doing. Just one line today, one area of the peg, and we'll just look to try and catch through the water and also on the deck. So we'll mix it up as the day goes on and hopefully put a nice net of fish together. So we'll turn around on the peg now and start fishing. Right, so we're just going to go for the first chuck on camera. Like I said, we've been fishing for about 10 minutes and just started getting to a run of fish. So I'm starting off on the 1 gram bodied rig. And like I say, with those spread shot, I'll be able to see where the fish are in the water over the ground bait. So hook bait wise, I'm just starting off with a double maggot hook bait. Again, not too selective, but as the day goes on, like I've mentioned, we'll probably look to switch to casters and maybe chop worm as well. There we go, that's a biting a fish on straight away. It's a nice roach. As you can see, the fish here at Lindley are in immaculate condition, really nice fish to catch. Just pop the hook out of him. And you can also see with the stamp of them how it shouldn't take long to build a weight, I should say. So a good couple of ounces a piece. Because I've had that bite quite quickly, I'm not going to change the hook bait straight away. So the maggots aren't too badly damaged. Like I say, with those strung number 10s down the line as well, below the bulk, I'm able to sort of read the float as it settles, to try and get an idea of where the fish are in terms of the ground bait. That's pretty much just on the settle. So to start off, it looks like they've settled right over the top of the ground bait. In which case I should be able to get away with fishing the pencil rig next. So as the session goes on today, I'm expecting the fish to come up in the water and possibly up the shelf a bit, so that's why I've got that deck rig set up, like I said, a section shorter. Just gives them the option then. So again, to speed up the process, I'm basically swinging the rig across the peg and then dropping the bulk right in line with my far bank marker and then dropping the float on top of that, and that's the quickest way of getting the float to set. Just missed that bite that time. Because it looks like there's a few fish present, I'm going to keep the amount of hempen casters that I'm feeding quite high. So again, if I'm missing lots of bites, that's when I'll look to change the rig. So whether it's a case of there's a biting a fish on, that one was well up in the water. I was going to say, if I keep missing bites or getting bites on the drop like that, that's when I'll look to pick up the shallow rigs. Another lovely stamp roach, that's slightly bigger than the last one this time. So like I say, although I'm only fishing one area of the peg, I've got pretty much every eventuality covered. So I can chop and change through the day. Like I say, I can catch shallow, and if the fish then seem to sort of back out of the peg or become a bit wary, then I can always look to put in another ball of ground bait to try and settle them back down. And again, as the day warms up as well, because we're getting into autumn now, if they start coming up the shelf, then I've also got that deck rig option covered. So hopefully by keeping a decent sized feed area, and chopping and changing through the day, I should be able to pick fish off from the shore pretty much non-stop all day. There we go, that's another fish on. One of the other advantages as well of fishing on the slope means that I can also tweak how far over depth I'm fishing as well as the day goes on. Just by, say in this case with this rig, I can move it say 2-3 inches further back up the shelf, and that'll give me an extra inch or so on depth. So I've got plenty of options in terms of variation of how I'm fishing the peg. I think as it stands, it won't be long before I go onto that pencil rig, which will allow me to fish a lot quicker. Right, so there's another fish on now. Another thing that's worth noting as well is how I'm doing my loose feed. So I'm trying to basically have nothing dropping past, it's a nice little perch, nothing dropping past my pole or my 13 metre line. So basically everything that's landing short should then also cover the 11.5 metre swim. So same again, speed up the process. I'm not changing the hook bait. You can already see how we're off to a really good start. Like I say, it was quite apparent after we first fed. The fish didn't come to the ground bait straight away. But after about 5 or 10 minutes of loose feeding casters and making a bit of noise, the fish have come to the ground bait and started to settle a bit. Just pulled out of that one. So the bait's still good for another fish. Let's put that section to one side. So it's already noticeable as well how the bites, pretty much all bar one, have come just as the last couple of droppers are settling. So that's telling me that the pencil rig will be the next one to go to. There we go, that's another fish on now. I'll just get my hemp seed fed. Another nice stamp roach. It's just dropped off that one. So it's always the danger of swinging fishing, but I say it mustn't have been properly hooked that time. Put a couple of fresh maggots on, and again I think one of the other options that I've got next is to switch to fishing casters on the hook and see if the stamp improves. But going off the stamp fish that we've had already, they're already a really good size. So if it slows down my catch rate, I won't stick with that change. There's another bite, another fish on. The bait's still good for another fish. That's every time while the rig's settling, I'm just going to get the loose feed in, pouch of casters, and then a pouch of hemp. There we go, just biting another fish on. So when the fishing's as good as this, it's just a case of maintaining a nice steady rhythm with your fishing. So you get the loose feeding, striking tip fish, another nice stamp roach, then ship back and repeat the process. Just have to change the hook bait on this one. While I've got the rig in, I'm also going to bring some shot down as well and just fish a bit more positively. So all I'm going to do is group my shot now. So I've just got 2 number 10s, then another 2 number 10s sort of 5 inches above that, and then I'm also going to bring the bulk down as well. That was an indication straight away and a bit of a lift bite. So that's telling me that the fish had just sat slightly off bottom there. So again, by pairing the shot up, I could quite easily see a lift bite. It's a slightly smaller stamp roach. Same again, hemp and casters over the top. Another nice positive bite. Already it's noticeable that the perch certainly seem to be a smaller stamp than the roach. So ideally I want to be catching the roach, which means in all likelihood I won't move towards fishing the chopped worm today. It's those little sort of decisions that will make a massive difference to the weight that you've caught at the end of the session. The other problem with catching perch as well, certainly in deeper water, they are quite notorious for dropping off. There's an indication as the bulk was settling that time. Another little lift on the float. So it's looking like the fish are starting to come up off the bottom now. There we go, that's another one on. Another nice roach nailed right in the top lip. So I think for a quick change I will just have a look at fishing double caster and see if that makes any difference to the stamper roach that I'm catching. Just picking out 2 fairly dark casters. And we'll see if this makes any difference. There we go, that's a bite on the double caster. So also, when we started off today, I did put in some slightly nicer stamp fish. I did put in a few grains of corn with the ground bait, so I can also try that to see if that sorts out any better stamp fish. That's a nice size roach, is that? As you can see, we're already starting to build a decent weight. So we'll try again on double caster. That seemed to get through and down to the bottom without any sort of little indications on its way down. So again, if I'm missing bites off small perch on the maggot, double caster might be the way to avoid that. There we go, that's another fish on the double caster. Another nice stamp roach. So these are probably going maybe 4 or so to the pound. So you can see how quickly you can build a weight doing this. I think for the time being we'll stick it out on double caster, and possibly, I think the next shout, like I said earlier, will be making a change to that 1.5 gram pencil rig. There we go, that was a nice positive lift on the float that time. And that's the advantage of having those shot with like a double shot to create a heavier dropper. See a small perch this time. So like I say, I think we'll carry on with this for a bit, and then I'd advise you when we make another change to the rigs. Right, so we're at the halfway point of the session now, and I've just topped up again. So basically I've topped up every hour since we started, but this time I've put in a bit more feed. I've put in 2 balls of ground bait, and I've rammed them absolutely full of casters, dead maggots, hemp and a few grains of corn. So I think as we've been loose feeding, it's just drawn more and more fish into the peg, and it's apparent that it's fishing really well at the moment. I say I've had some lovely stamp roach, plenty of perch, and I've even hooked and lost what I think was a bream. There's another fish on now. So with that in mind, I've put an extra inch of depth on just to try and target the bream a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is just chop and change between corn and caster on the hook. It's another stamp roach. So I've pretty much gone through nearly all the rigs today. The only one that I haven't tried is that 11.5 metre line where I'm fishing on the bottom, purely because this line's so much better, it seems, than any other option that I've fished. I've fished on the shallow rigs as well, and there's plenty of roach up in the water, certainly a few of a decent stamp about that sort of size, but there's also a lot of smaller fish up there as well, and I've missed a few bites. Like I said, I've given it a try for about sort of 5-10 minutes, but compared to how many fish I'm catching fishing on the deck with this rig, it's not really worth doing. I think if we're going to build a weight today, it's just a case of, like I say, sticking with this 1 gram bodied rig and just changing between corn and casters on the hook. Obviously the other problem with fishing shallow has been the wind. As you can see, it's quite a swirling wind, and that's also led to a lot of missed bites, especially fishing light rigs. So I've made another slight alteration to this rig as well, where I've dropped the bulk down a little bit more, probably another 6 inches further down, and I've also brought the shot down a bit closer to the hook length. So I've probably got to drop one right on top of the hook length, and I've got one about 4 inches above that, and then the bulk's about another 6 inches further up than that. There's another fish on now. Like I was saying at the start of the video, the entire premise of what we're doing today is giving myself plenty of options, seeing how the fish want to feed, and then chopping and changing between rigs and presentation and hook baits rather than changing between different lines. So on these sort of big reservoirs, because you're fishing mainly to try and draw a shoal of fish into the peg, ideally if there's a decent shoal there and you've got a decent feed area, if you can pick off fish from around the feed area as the session progresses, you can keep fish coming all day. So I've still been keeping the hemp and caster loose feed going in over the top as well. A lot of that's getting eaten on the way down, but again, it's just a case of trying to get those fish shoaled up in the area and keeping them occupied. And every so often when I've needed to, that's when I've put a ball of ground bait in just to pin them back down on the bottom and get them feeding where I want to be catching them. So again, I've not really gone back to the maggot hook baits purely because of the amount of perch in the peg. And same again for a brief couple of casts. I tried worm and it was the same issue there with catching small perch, getting plenty of indications, but in terms of catching the quality fish, it just wasn't really happening. There's a fish on. Speaking of small perch, there's one on there that's just taken on a lift and drop. Like I said, I'm trying to avoid these in favour of trying to catch the roach in the peg. So again, we'll go back out on double caster. It seems to have been the best hook bait today. Like I said, I've tried corn every so often and had a few roach on that, but I've mainly used the corn when the wind's picked up and I've needed to have a heavier bait to anchor to the bottom. But the difference is with corn, obviously, I'm waiting a little bit longer for bites, and I think in terms of trying to build a a good weight, I can catch much quicker on the double caster than I can on the sweet corn. Again, it's always worth trying every so often just to see if there's a better stamp fish in the peg. But that bream that I hooked and lost, that was on double caster, so there we go, that's another fish on. So as I say, it's just a case of chopping and changing between the two hook baits. It's another nice stamp roach. As I said, these were the sort of stamper fish that I was catching shallow on the caster, but as I say, I was missing that many bites and struggling with rig presentation that it wasn't really worth the effort. And these are the sort of things that are important to think about when you're looking to try and build a weight on a venue like this. Again, if the conditions were flat calm, it might have been a bit better fishing shallow, but as it's panned out, the weather's been a bit different to the forecast and the wind's a bit stronger. But again, if the weather had been as it was forecast, then I'd have certainly been able to fish shallow a bit more effectively, and it might have turned out that would have been the better way to fish it today. So it's always worth having the rig set up just to cover the options. So like I say, we've probably got about 3 or so hours left of the session now. So it's looking like we probably won't have to change anything as it stands. Just looking to fish casters on the bottom, like I say, with the odd bit of sweet corn, and then topping up a ball of ground bait between every 45 minutes and an hour. Seems to be the best way of doing it. So definitely after putting those 2 balls of ground bait in, it's definitely settled them nicely on the bottom. There's another fish on now. Little perch this time. So I think what we'll do, we'll carry on with this. Like I say, it seems to be the best way of tackling it today. And if we catch anything bigger or we change anything later on in the session, then we'll give you an update then. Right, so we're coming up towards the end of the session now. You'll notice I've made a quick change in rigs. Considering the past couple of hours, I think we'll only have fished 5 hours all in all by the end of today, as opposed to the 6 that we were planning on doing. But I've made a quick change with and put up another rig. Considering it changes in terms of the weather with the wind, it picked up massively early, so I've actually set up a much heavier rig. This one's on a 10 hollow elastic, and I've got a 3 gram Sensus Danube float, really heavy float, and I've actually got a size 14 hook on this, and I'm just trying double corn. I've already had a couple of fish on it. Again, I've set it up pretty much after the last top up, where I put in another 2 balls of ground bait. And like I say, because there was a fair chop on the water, I thought it'd be best to try and target some better stamp fish. And we've had a roach that's probably best part of 12 ounce, and also a couple of others around 8 ounce as well. So it's definitely been a rig worth setting up. It's just sort of got me out of jail, if you like, in terms of not being able to read or see the lighter rigs. There's a bit of an indication there already. So the hook bait that I've got on this rig is double sweet corn. So it's a very big bait and not something that you tend to associate with roach fishing, but considering how many fish are in front of us today and how well it's fishing, I think it's certainly been worth setting up anyway. So we've had a couple of dry spells as well in and amongst where, like I say, the wind's picked up and it's made it almost unfishable at 13 metres. So it's not been the same sort of catch rate that we started with, but by loose feeding and keeping the odd ball of ground bait going in, I'll say keeping the hemp and casters going in over the top, we've managed to keep fishing the peg all day for the full 5 hours that we fished today. So hopefully it sort of gives a bit of an idea as to how to tackle these kind of natural venues or these big reservoirs when you're fishing on the pole. Again, there's, like I said earlier in the video, there's no point setting up a ton of different lines and loads of different approaches. I think the best way of tackling them is pretty much what we've done today, where we've set up and targeted fishing around one feed area. Like I say, I've not dropped onto the 11.5 metre line. I've just concentrated, and basically I've not even fed at 11.5 metres since the start. I've just concentrated at 13 metres because I think that's where the fish seem happiest. And I think largely that's down to the depth of water as well. So like I say, I must have fed probably about 12 or 13 balls of ground bait over the course of the session. We started off with 5 on this 13 metre line. The last 3 top-ups I've put in 2 balls at a time. Like I say, it's just been a case of putting those 2 balls in to try and nail the fish to the bottom rather than, there's a bit of a lift bite there, rather than trying to catch them sort of fishing through the water on strung rigs. It's been a case of using the loose feed to draw the fish into the area and then the ground bait to get them down to where we're able to catch them. So in terms of the rigs that we've used today, pretty much I've concentrated on, well, most of the fish have come on that first rig that I went through, which is the bodied rig in a gram. Again, it's not often you set up a ton of rigs and, you know, the first one you pick up is the right one for the day, but it definitely has been today. Especially with the body on the float, it's just allowed me to hold back a bit more into the wind, where I wouldn't have been able to do that with the pencil rig. And certainly the fish have been watching the bait fall through the last couple of feet of water as well, so that rig's been pretty much invaluable today. I say we've had a couple of goes shallow, we've had a couple of fish on it, there's a lift bite there. But as I say, that wasn't right today. With the amount of wind that we've had, just presenting those rigs was too difficult in the conditions. And it led to a lot of missed bites. Like I say, with the pencil rig, it was definitely useful at points, and just missed a bite there. But that was only really when the lake had calmed down a bit. So as I say, we've pretty much concentrated on one rig today, which is that gram bodied rig. So this 3 gram one's come into it a bit later on as conditions have worsened. Like I say, we've had a couple of better stamp fish, but the main thing today has just been chopping and changing between the hook baits on that 1 gram rig, using sweet corn in single or occasionally double on it, and then mixing that up with fishing on double caster. Like I say, we started fishing maggots, but there's been a lot of small perch in the peg today, even though I've not fed any chop worm whatsoever. So by fishing double caster and single corn, I've been able to get through them a bit and target the roach. We've had the odd perch on single corn, and the odd perch as well on double caster. But broadly through the session, we've been able to target the roach more than catching the small perch that have been a bit of a nightmare. And as I said, on these kind of venues, they can be a real pain at times. So hopefully we'll be able to just catch one or two fish on the double corn to finish off before we get the net out and have a look at what we've caught. I think we've certainly had double figures today, but I'm not sure if we've got near the 20 pounds that I was hoping to catch earlier. Like I say, a lot of that's just been down to the logistics of getting the rig into the water and presenting the bait correctly with the wind that we've had. And there we go, that's a fish on the double corn. So I think we'll probably call this the last one on camera. Like I say, I'll probably have a couple more chucks before we finish. As you can see, the 2 bits of corn there above the roach, and that's a lovely stamp fish to finish the video on. So like I say, we'll pop this one in the net and then we'll have a look at what we've caught. So as you can see there, that's our final net of fish. It's a good few pound, not far off double figures, maybe just over. Like I said, we had a cracking start, but things sort of tailed off as the wind picked up a little bit, and as I say, we fished a few hours short of what we intended today. But as you can see, it's a lovely net of fish, some lovely stamp roach in there. I say plenty of that sort of stamp, a few perch as well, and one sort of better one that's somewhere in the bottom of that net there, and that's him there. Lovely stamp roach. So hopefully, like I say, a few things that we've covered today in terms of fishing these sort of big natural venues, give you a few ideas of how to tackle them for yourselves. Like I say, it's been a natural bait approach, dead simple today, 1 line, a few different rigs, chopping and changing, and we've put a nice net of fish together. So as always from Last Cast, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on that next episode.